Hi, Glauco Longi here, and if you're thinking about getting into digital sculpting, this is the time. ZBrush, which is pretty much the industry standard, just launched their version for the iPad a couple months ago, and this is going to be a quick introduction, direct to the point, so you can get going in sculpting in no time. Let's do it. This is an iPad Pro 2018, so definitely not one of the latest models, and it runs ZBrush fine. So this is ZBrush, the application. We're going to launch it. We're going to come in here and click New Sculpt. We're going to select this sphere. On the right side, you have a button here called camera. So I'm gonna change this camera to 85. You can change different focal lengths here to get different perspectives. Below, it's called the grid if you wanna see the floor. I just disabled that because I don't wanna see the floor. So basically, if I draw here, it's drawing on the other side. So anything I do in any other side is gonna be mirrored to the other side. All right, so this is plenty. How do we navigate here? We're gonna pinch in and out. So I'm zooming in and out. Touch with your finger and rotate, and then with two fingers you can pan, and then you can move the model around. I'm gonna mention how I do this in a different way too, because that's how way I do in the computer with a tablet. If you click outside of the model, you also rotate the model. If you hold Alt, and then if you click outside of the model, you're gonna be panning. And then if you hold Alt, click, release Alt, and now move your pen, you're gonna be zooming in. So because this is how we control on the computer, I'm much more used to navigating like this, but basically it's the same thing as you're doing with your fingers, which makes ZBrush for the iPad very, very easy and intuitive to use. All right, here at the bottom, we have a bunch of different brushes. You don't need to worry about most of these right now. We're gonna be using the standard, this third one here, which is called Clay Build Up, and we're gonna be using this Move. And I guess we're gonna be using this Dam standard as well. With these four brushes, you're gonna be able to achieve, 99% of what I do. Let's go over these other guys here. Like this is the control button, and this is gonna create a mask. And then if you click a mask, create a mask, you can just click and drag outside of the mesh and then it clears the mask. Just remember that. So if you click here by accident, created a mask, what the mask is doing is basically, what do you think? It's actually masking that region, right? So it's not allowing that region to be manipulated. If you tap with two buttons, you can undo, and then with three buttons, you can redo. All right, so that's very straightforward. This final guy here is the shift, which activates a different type of brush, which is the smooth brush. So with the smooth brush, you can just smooth out the surface, right? So you are not erasing, you are smoothing the surface. So if we look here from a different angle, we're gonna be finding the average of all of this surface, right? So then it becomes more smooth. Does that make sense? How do we control the size of the brush? So you can use three fingers again and make this big and small, or you can use this guy here on the left side. And I like using this because my thumb is right over here already, so I can just change on the fly. So I can be doing this, and then I can change on the fly, and I can be doing this, and then I can make this much smaller. So I'm gonna go with this Dam standard, and I'm gonna carve a couple different like random shapes here, some random organic scribbles here. And now let's use this another brush here, which called the Clay Build Up. So the Clay Build Up will add clay, but it adds in a more organic way. So it has different properties in the way it works. It fills up the holes and also leaves a little bit of a texture, right? So I like using this texture to kind of indicate form. So sometimes I go with the form and sometimes I go across the form. So you can actually see now that I'm building up this form and this relief here, making it a little bit rounder. So I'm kind of cross-hatching the surface, which helps us indicate that there is volume there. If we hold Alt key, this guy here is gonna do the opposite. So it's gonna carve, and that's just gonna go very strong here. It's gonna carve out these shapes. So you can kind of go back and forth holding Alt, carving negatively, like removing, adding a little bit here. So then I'm changing directions. And then I start to, use a little bit of what we call calligraphy to indicate some of my forms and my style. So, all right, so I'm doing this here, and then you can actually see here that I'm starting to, play with some of these shapes a little bit more. Let's go to the standard. I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller, and I'm gonna start to add a little bit more forms here. So let's see, we're gonna do a couple wrinkles here. I don't know, this is just, so let's just kind of build a little bit of like a transition here. And you can see like I'm holding Alt, doing the negative side and doing the positive side, and then I can start playing. Let's see, this is a little bit too abrupt, so I can actually go to my smooth, just hold shift here, and then I can actually smooth it out and varying the pressure of the pen, break it up, creating some sort of like random organic surface here. Let's just go back to the DEM standard and define some of these shapes. So I'm gonna go on a little bit of a smaller, and I can actually come in here and carve, you know, some of these wrinkles here. And then if I hold Alt, I'm gonna be, you know, adding some very fine details here. And you may be wondering, like, what the heck is going on with all of these pixelated squares showing up? And these are polygons. I'm not gonna go into why they exist and why they're here and why they're showing, but what you need to understand is basically we are at the maximum resolution of this model right now. I'm gonna click on this guy here, which is gonna show my topology, which is, you know, my little squares, which actually makes this sphere. And if I pull this back, you can actually see I'm actually stretching all of those little squares. Each one of those square is a polygon, each one of these points is a vertex, and then I'm just stretching all of them, right? If I really stretch them like this, basically no points for me to be sculpting. When we are sculpting, what we are literally doing is just manipulating these points in space. So if I use this guy here and I go very small, and then I apply pressure here, what I'm basically doing, I'm grabbing each one of these verts and just lifting them along the normals, right, like the tangents. And if I hold Alt, I'm just pushing these guys in. If there are no points here for me to manipulate, there's basically nothing I can do. So there is a feature here called Dynamesh. Dynamesh will recalculate distribution of little square of polygons. So in order to reprocess that, you can turn this off and turn this on, and then it will reprocess. So you can actually see now it generated a same amount of triangles or polygons across my entire surface. So I have an even amount of distribution across here and also across here. The size of my squares, the size of my polygons are still big enough. So we're gonna go into the Dynamesh settings here. I'm gonna hold and then just gonna pop up. I'm using resolution 128, so basically you can increase this. So let's just go to, I don't know, around 400. And then I'm gonna go in this guy here and then reprocess. And now you can see, like, look at the size of these triangles, right? Like the size of each one of these polygons. So if I turn off this view, which I don't need to be seeing that anymore, now I have much more resolution across my entire mesh, right? So in this moment, you can, you know, like work in the proportions, work on the big shapes. All right, I say like, this is much more defined. All right, I wanna start adding like some other structures here. So you can go to the Dynamesh and you can just increase the Dynamesh and then you can turn it on, and now you see like I have much more details here, and it can start smoothing out all of these sections, and there you go. So now you can come in here and start carving some of these forms. All right, I didn't do anything visually appealing because I wanted to make this very obvious that I'm not doing anything crazy here, right? Like I'm using very simple brushes and my process is very, very simple. And then with this process, we're gonna go into a quick demo now and do something a little bit more exciting. But again, I'm not gonna be doing anything differently than I just used here, right? So lastly, one thing I want to mention is something called subtools. So this object here on screen, it's referred as Z tool in ZBrush, just terminology for you know, and subtools are tools within this tool. So basically they are somewhat like layers in Photoshop. So you have like one layer, one object here called polysphere, which is this sphere, and we can add another one. So click on the plus sign, let's just add another one. So it added another sphere, right? And then if you click here on the gizmo, it gives you a full 3D space transform to move your stuff around. So you can move here, you can scale, you can rotate, and do whatever you want. So let's just jump into a quick demo using all of these tools together. All right, so start with a move brush and just finding the main proportions. Then quickly I move into the clay buildup brush, which is the brush that I mainly use to block out or to draw or to carve out shapes or to even add clay. I like that it gives directionality, and because it leaves small marks, you can kind of cross hatch with it. You can go with the form, against the form. holding the Alt key, you can actually flatten areas as well, and that's very important to be able to find the planes and define the structures a little bit more. My approach to sculpting is a mixture between all of the different styles, from drawing, painting, sculpting, that I've developed throughout the years. I'll do more videos on that topic specifically later, but you can see here that I'm carving, defining shapes, looking at structures, and not smoothing things too much. So I like to keep things relatively rough with indication marks and refine them piece by piece. So instead of smoothing the whole surface, I like to work with smaller brushes. For those who paint, it's basically the same idea as not blending in things too much. Although there are moments for blending things, and there are moments for using the smooth brush here for me. So, but just conceptually thinking that you want to be more direct and precise, and not very shy with each of your decisions. Want to be making conscious decisions, so taking your time to think about what you're doing and developing the sense of ownership on each brush stroke. You can see that I'm going with even smaller brushes now. I also changed the resolution, so I have much more resolution. Here I'm using the DEM standard to sort of help me out, draw a little bit on the surface. And again, using different type of textures to indicate different parts of the surface, going with fine lines, harsher lines, subtle lines, and there you go. This is a quick sketch, roughly 30 minutes of work. So obviously I only covered the very basic stuff here of ZBrush and digital sculpting, but you can do so much with it. Try to avoid getting bogged down with all of the technical stuff and all of the difficulties of digital sculpting, especially if it's a new medium for you, and just focus on sculpting and having fun. And like I said, just using very basic tools, you can get so much done. Go ahead, pick up your iPad, share this video with your friend that has been trying to get into digital sculpting but has been delaying that for so long. If you are a draftsman, a painter, this is the moment, and let's have some fun. All right, till the next time, bye.